Hey, Read Through the Word. Today is October 24th, and today's lesson is called Fruitless. So here we are. I'm glad to be with you for the next couple of days, but I want to stop and before we read our verse, I want to put in context where we are. So if you'll notice in the past couple of days with the readings, you'll see a phrase that continues to show up, and it says, "And Jesus went up to Jerusalem," and it starts talking. You see that same phrasing. So go back and look. I want you to see it. The kid talking about, "And Jesus went up, and Jesus went up." So we're trying to draw attention that he's headed to Jerusalem. He's headed to Jerusalem and remember, those of you who are in conference, we did talk about this, but every time you see that they went up, and you're like, okay, Jesus is in Galilee, and Galilee's in the north, and Jerusalem's in the south. That's not up. It's called elevation wise. Israel is very the highest point in all of the land is Jerusalem. So everywhere, wherever you are in Israel, or at this point we're in Judea, you are going up to Jerusalem. So you see that phrase a lot, and now you see that. We are in Holy Week, Passion Week in the life of Jesus. So the last week leading up to the crucifixion. Actually, we're 4 days from the crucifixion in our readings today. So yesterday, your readings were Sunday of that week, the Triumphal Entry, which would also we know it as Palm Sunday. And so that was your readings yesterday. Now today is Monday of Holy Week, and there are two seemingly unrelated events that happen on that day. We're going to connect them and look at that. But according to scholars, the date of this day that we're reading about is Monday, March 30th, which would be in our time, not the Hebrew calendar, but March 30th of 33 AD, or AD 33 is how you would say it. So that's the date we're looking at today in our reading. And so it seems like some unrelated texts, but they are all related. And that's what we want to look at today. So the verse specifically, I keep saying specifically. The verses I want to look at are Mark 11, 12 through 14. This is, "The next morning as they were leaving Bethany, Jesus was hungry. He noticed a fig tree in full leaf a little way off. So he went over to see if he could find any figs. And there were only leaves, because it was too early in the season for fruit. And then Jesus said to the tree, 'May no one ever eat of your fruit again.' And the disciples heard him say it." And then you get Matthew. Matthew has an account of this as well. So there are a few things about fig trees we need to talk about, and there's all sorts of things. So what I want us to see is in our text, in our reading today, you have, which I've put as your something old today. We start off with this seemingly unrelated text from John, but what John has to say fits in perfectly with the cursing of the fig tree and the cleansing of the temple. Those are the two events that happen in Passion Week, Holy Week on Monday. And John talks specifically. There I go again. I keep using that word. John speaks and reminds us. Remember those two things he puts before us constantly: belief and unbelief. Belief and unbelief. So John is reminding us as we head into these. This is what I love about the chronological Bible, and that it handles these things and it helps us make some connections. So even if I wasn't here with you today, you would think, how is this related? Why is this all together? And so this is but we're looking at we're looking at the unbelief of the Jews. And that's what this whole lesson's about, the unbelief of the Jews. So, what we see right here from the text is that Jesus had spent the night in Bethany, which is home of his friends, now raised from the dead, Lazarus, and Mary and Martha. So he's been over in Bethany, and now he comes into Jerusalem. He had come in the day before, the Triumphal Entry and all of that, gone back to Bethany for the night. This will be his pattern for the week. He comes back this next morning, and he sees the fig tree. So we're given these accounts of the cursing of the fig tree and the cleansing of the temple that are right here. So, what I want us to look at is quite a few things, actually. Let's talk about fig trees first, because we might, might not be aware of a lot of things about fig trees. Now, in my old house, I used to live in an old farmhouse out in the country, and then we moved to the house we have now, so that my parents could live with us. So the house I'm in now, my parents live with us. And so my old house, I had a fig tree, and I loved it just because, not that I ever knew much about figs, but it was, the Bible mentions fig trees so much. So I thought it was really neat to have a fig. The only thing I knew about figs was what the Bible says about figs and fig Newtons. I used to love fig Newtons, those little cookies. And so that's what I knew. And, through years of Bible study and stuff, I've learned more. But fig trees, so it's like Jesus is mad at a fig tree. This is very confusing for some people. So let's talk about fig tree first. A fig tree, very common. We see Jesus sitting and teaching under fig trees. We see fig trees all through the Bible, but we see fig trees as a symbol for something. So let's look at, we got two verses I want us to look at. The first one is Jeremiah 8:13. And Jeremiah 8, if I can find it, Jeremiah 8:13 says this: I will gather them and bring them to an end. This is the Lord's declaration. There will be no grapes on the vine, no figs on the fig tree, and even the leaf will wither. Whatever I have given them will be lost to them. So this is Jeremiah. Now we're also going over to Hosea chapter 9, verse 10, that says, I discovered Israel like grapes in the wilderness. I saw your fathers like the first fruit of the fig tree in its first season. But they went to Baal, consecrated themselves to shame, and became abhorrent, like the thing they loved. So, what we see throughout the Old Testament is a fig tree is a symbol for Israel. And so this isn't some random fig tree, and this isn't Jesus mad at a tree. This has meaning. Now, always remember that what original scripture would have meant to the original audience is the plainest reading of the text. We tend to over-spiritualize some things or not pay attention. So it is helpful sometimes when we know these things about fig trees. So when I was looking at this, I'm like, what is the problem with fig trees? Now, it says that Jesus was coming from Bethany and he sees the fig tree. Now, Matthew and Mark both give us accounts of this. They are differently ordered, and that's a lesson for another day. But he sees the leaves on the fig trees, and he comes over, and there's no figs. And he's like, cursed are you. And then whether you read Matthew or Mark, is going to say that the disciples noticed the fig tree, or it might say when they travel back by, they noticed the fig tree has withered at that point. But what we see is a fig tree in full leaf, but no figs. What's the point? Okay, so I've got two. Some of y'all love when I do stuff like this. So that's what we're gonna pull the nerdy for just a second. Which I'm gonna put in a thing right here. I had one of the greatest things happen to me. It actually happened to me yesterday that I've never had happen to me. I was outside at my car, and a nice lady was like, "Are you Lisa Nance?" And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "I do read through the Word." I mean, it was great. It was really great. So we had mutual friends, and so it was fun though. But like, she knew me from this, so that was great. And so I was glad to read through the Word people. But and we talked a lot about the nerdy stuff I do. And so I've got two books that I'm pulling out today. Now, one of them is this. It's the Illustrated Encyclopedia of Bible Facts. I would say I very rarely use this book. There have been times where I've thought I need to donate it to somebody. And so it gets pulled out every once in a while. But this talks about figs. So it takes everything you would ever encounter in the Bible and gives you more information. So figs. It says the fig tree was cultivated in Palestine and other Mediterranean countries. Although it's not tall, its large leaves and widely spreading branches provide excellent shade. Sitting under a fig tree was typical of peace and prosperity. You see that in 1 Kings, in Micah, and in Zechariah. The Hebrew word for the fig tree was tinah, which means to spread out. There are 2 crops of figs in ancient Palestine. The early harvest appeared in June and was called the Bekor, which is what is actually in the next chapter of Hosea. Hosea talks about Hosea 9 and then in Isaiah. The later crop ripened continually. So the fig tree can ripen, it can have multiple crops of figs 10 months out of the year. So August through March. Now remember, we're March 30th. Okay, the fig tree is small and pear-shaped and often forms before the leaves. The fig forms before the leaves appear. So if there's leaves, there should be figs. Okay, so that's what that book tells us. Now, I have another book that's called The Erdman's Handbook to the Bible. And I've had this a really long time. You can look at the print and tell how long I've had this. And then this one says this. I like this because it goes by book of the Bible and by verse and gives you the cultural references you may need. It says this: a healthy fig tree bears fruit for 10 months of the year. Since the tree was in leaf, there should have been green figs. Mark makes it clear that following day, when the disciples found the tree withered, Jesus uses the incident as an object lesson. And so he talks to them more. But this one tells us, okay, so what's this saying is Jesus saw the leaves on the tree. Because he saw the leaves on the tree and he grew up in that area and was around figs all the time, he's like, that tree has figs, let's go eat figs. When he gets there, there's no figs. And so the fig tree is not only the fig tree is the nation of Israel. And so he goes over and there's no figs. And he said, cursed are you, and there will be no more your land. You should have fruit. There's no fruit here. You are fruitless, and you will be fruitless forever. And that's what he says. And so we have that right here. So what Jesus is saying is that the nation of Israel is just as barren as the fig tree. All talk and no heart. There is nothing on that fig tree that's supposed to be there. So, and then all of a sudden we see this totally unrelated thing, the cleansing of the temple, which most people are well aware of this story. If you grew up in the church, you've heard about Jesus cleansing the temple. Why? How is this related? What does this have to do with each other? So, what happens is the Lord's house had been turned into a den of thieves. So this is where one of these books was grateful, or, you can search this on studylight.org or Blue Letter Bible or Bible Gateway. All of those have study options that will tell you more about these things. But the idea that wherever you were from, if you came from a far place on a pilgrimage for a feast or a festival, or there's that word again. I got to find a new word other than specifically. For Passover this week. So he's heading into 4 days before Passover, heading into Passover. Everybody's coming from all around for their, to make their sacrifice. But they don't bring a lamb from home. They don't cart all of this. They come in, change their money, so then they can, so he comes into the temple, the house of God, and finds just as much fruitlessness as he found in the fig tree. There is money changers that are, this is supposed to be the court of the Gentiles, where anyone who wants to hear about God can come in, and where we're going to see Jesus is going to be in the temple for the next couple of days of reading cover all of his teaching in the temple as we're headed into the Thursday of that week as we go through the next couple of days. But when we see this in this temple, what we're watching is that Jesus is saying not only is the fig tree cursed, but not only is the fig tree cursed, and so is Israel. Not only is the nation cursed by the fig, but Jesus went inside the tree. He went to the heart, the temple, and all he found was decay and rot, just as fruitless. They weren't hurt. The people's religion was all talk and no heart. That's why he's cleansing. They're not being what they're supposed to be. All he found was decay and death, not who they were called to be. So the fig tree and the cleansing of the temple and John's statement on the unbelief of the Jews are all related. And he's even related into yesterday with the Triumphal Entry, and Jesus is weeping over Jerusalem because he knew what's coming. But there is so much there that's going to be every day of Passion Week. That Jesus is, he's gone from public ministry. He's pulled himself aside. He is headed to the cross. These are his last days, and he knows this, and he knows Israel doesn't believe. The unbelief that he knows Israel does not believe. And we watch this. So here we are, 21st century Christians, and we look at this text. We're not Israel. I mean, there are some correlations we could make there. We make much application with the cleansing of the temple about not making the house of God a den of robbers, a den of thieves. But I think what we see from the fruitless tree and the fruitless temple is the whole idea of fruitlessness. And that's where we need to park on. Don't be a dead fig tree. We should bear fruit. James 2:26, Galatians 5:22, John 15, all talk about the importance of bearing fruit. That's what this was all about. There was no fruit being born by Israel, the nation, the tree, or the temple. They'd lost their way. Let's not be the same. Let's bear much fruit. So we'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.